Hello and welcome to this Tinkershop tutorial. My name is Martin from the Innisfil Idea Lab and Library, and today I'm going to be teaching you about web scraping with Python. So what is web scraping? Well, picture this. So let's say we have a project where we're analyzing some data. So in this case, let's say we have this list of basketball data. And so we want to do some analysis on these statistics. So we'd like to take this table that exists on a web page and import all of the data into a spreadsheet for further analysis. So I could copy and paste each cell of information from the website into a spreadsheet, but it's a pretty big table, and this might take me about an hour. But with Python, I can write a script in a matter of minutes that will scrape all of this data from the website and write that into a spreadsheet in a matter of seconds. So it's a lot more efficient, and if you're working with even larger data sets, it can really save you a lot of time. Another example would be, I have this list of financial information. This is a table of currencies around the world and their values. So you could write a script that basically scrapes this table every day and writes that to a spreadsheet that you can then analyze and make charts or whatever your use case is. So web scraping is just scraping different sets of data from a web page. In today's example, we're going to be working with this list of the top rated 250 movies of all time on the Internet Movie Database. And so this is a pretty big list. It's 250 listings. And for our example today, we're going to want to pull each title and the year that it was released from this list of data. So, this would probably take you several hours of copying and pasting. And again, with the script that we write, it'll take a matter of seconds to pull the data that we want and write it to a spreadsheet. And so how are we going to do this? Well, if you kind of look behind the scenes if you look at the code that basically makes up this website, so if I right-click my mouse and then click on Inspect Element, and if I do that right on this first listing, I can see the HTML code that basically renders this onto the page. And so if you're not familiar with HTML, you'll be fine following along in this tutorial, but for future web scraping, it's definitely worth your while to do a basic intro to HTML course, because you're going to need to have a basic understanding of HTML to tell our program which pieces of data to pick out. So here I can see the title is in an anchor tag, which is just a link in HTML. And this year is in this span tag. So when we write our program, we're going to tell it to pull this information from every single one of these tags in this list. So to do this, if you've been following along our previous tutorials, we've been using this great website called Glitch. It's just glitch.com. And this basically gives us a virtual environment that we can create all sorts of coding projects. For Python, it has everything we need. It has Python installed, it has a terminal, and so that's all we need. If you have a local environment set up on your computer, you're welcome to follow along that way as well. So we're going to go to glitch.com and we're going to click New Project, and we have a few basic templates that we have to choose from. There's no option for a blank template, so we'll just choose this first one, hello web page. So click new project and then hello web page. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is create our Python file where we're going to write all of our code. You can just ignore all of these auto-generated files in this project because we're not going to use any of these. So you're going to go to new file, and we can call this file scrape.py. And so now we have our blank Python file, and we have to import a few Python modules so that we can do the web scraping. So these aren't built into Python, these are third-party modules, and I'll show you how to set this up. So the first one we need is requests. So we're gonna type in import requests, and this module is going to allow us to request the website. And then we need a second module called Beautiful Soup, and Beautiful Soup allows you an easy way to basically work with that data. So we're gonna type in from bs4 import Beautiful Soup, and that's capitalized. And then lastly, the last thing we're going to do in this project is write everything to a CSV file. So we'll also have to import CSV. So next thing we have to do is actually install these first two modules in our project because they don't come with the default Python. So if we go, we're gonna have to go in the terminal. So go down to tools and then terminal. And if you've never installed third-party Python modules, it's pretty easy. We'll use the pip package manager. So in the terminal, you're going to type in pip install Beautiful Soup 4 and press enter. Alright, so it'll just take a second, and now it's successfully downloaded and installed Beautiful Soup 4 into this project. The next thing we need is requests. So I'm going to type in pip install requests. Oops. And that should just take a second, and there we go, successfully installed. And so if we tried to run our program without installing those, it'll give us an error because it's saying we're telling it to import something that's not installed. And this is one of the powerful things about Python is there's tons of modules that are really powerful that we can just install, and they make our lives a lot easier. So the first thing that we need to do is get the whole page that we're pulling the data from. So I'm just going to close these real quick, and we're pulling from this page here, so the IMDb top 250. So I'm going to copy this link, go back into our file, and we're going to create a variable called page and set that equal to a new request. So we're going to type in request dot get, and then open and close brackets, and we will pass this in as a string, and I'm just going to paste in paste in our URL. So you might want to pause and type in this URL if you're not able to find it on your own. And so the next thing, this will just request the entire web page in HTML. And the next thing we want to do is use Beautiful Soup to turn this into something that's easy to work with. So we're going to create another variable called soup and set that equal to Beautiful Soup. Make sure the B and the S are capitalized, and we got to pass in 2 arguments. We want to tell it to get the text of the page, so we'll type in page.text, and then we're going to be using HTML, so we type in html.parser. Okay, so this is pretty good so far. Let's just see what happens if we print out this soup variable. So we can just type in print and soup, go down to our terminal and run our file, python 3 scrape, ape.py. Press enter. It'll take a second to scrape that whole page, and look at that, it returns the entire HTML of that page, and it is a lot of data. And so basically what that's doing, if we go back to this page, if I right click and click on view page source, that's basically what we've pulled out. And so it's a lot of stuff, but it's actually fairly easy to just pick out exactly what we need. So that is what we're going to do next. We're going to tell it to just give us the stuff that we need. So basically each movie title and the year. Okay, so I'm going to delete this print statement. We don't need that anymore. So I'm going to create a movies variable, and this variable is going to hold every single listed movie in the list of our top 250 movies. So we'll have to go back to that page and look a bit into the HTML. So if I right click on any of these listings, so we'll click on one of the titles, so right click and then click inspect element. So that'll open this HTML inspector and it'll go right to where I right clicked on. So you can see that it's all in a table, and each of these TRs means table row. And so the one that we're looking at, it's a table row, and within that we have several table data elements. And so this link, our title here, is within this table data tag with a class of title column. And within that, we have this anchor tag. If you're unfamiliar with HTML, an anchor tag it's just a hyperlink. So that's what creates these as links. And so within this anchor tag, it has the link to the page for that movie. It's got a bit more information, but then it has the title itself. So here we have The Dark Knight. And then right here is where that anchor tag closes. And right after that, we have a span tag that contains the year that the movie was released. So these are the two pieces of data that we want, the title and the year. So we know that all of this data is contained within a table data element with a class of title column. So what we can do is we can use Beautiful Soup to find all of the tags with a class of title column and then tell it to pull in the data that we want within that tag. So again, if you're not familiar with HTML, this might be a little bit overwhelming, but you can do some tutorials online on HTML, and you can very quickly become pretty familiar that you would be able to inspect the HTML like this. And for each page, like for different websites, the HTML, of course, is always going to look different. So it does require a little bit of HTML knowledge. So we know the class of the tag that holds the information in each row. If I click on another movie, so let's right-click on The Godfather and inspect element, you can see it's also the information is also wrapped in a table data tag with a class of title column. So what we need to do is basically pull out every single instance of an element with the class of title column, and then we can pull the data from that. So let's start there. Let's just grab everything with a class of title column, and then we'll kind of work our way down from there. So we have our movies variable, and we're gonna set it equal to soup because we're gonna use this soup variable that is basically the whole page's HTML. So soup dot find all, and there's different methods you can use. Find all is just going to find everything that we put into these brackets. So in this instance, find everything with a class underscore equal to title column. And remember, if we go back here, each movie is wrapped in this tag with a class of title column. So we're telling it to find everything with a class of title column and assign that to our movies variable. Okay, and so where did I get this like title column and this find all method? If you go to the Beautiful Soup documentation, if you just Google Beautiful Soup documentation, it'll take you to this page. And so I just went down to searching by CSS class. So what these classes are, they're CSS classes, which are usually used for styling an HTML page. And so in this method, it tells you how to search by CSS class. So we can use this soup.findAll. We can specify exactly what tag and then the class. In our case, we're just going to use the class because there's probably no other tags using this specific class. If you want to make it more specific, you could do TD for table data and then the class. But it's very unlikely that any other element's going to use this class as well. So this is good enough for our purposes. So the next thing we want to do is let's actually just see what this looks like. So what this movies variable looks like if we just print it out. So we'll run a print movies, go down to our terminal, and let's just run our file. So we'll run python3 scrape.py, and it's going to take a second or two. Oh, and I thought we got an error, but no, it actually gave us everything. So it grabbed each of those elements with the class of title column. So you can see here, that's basically the HTML that we have on from the page. And it just separates them into a list. So that's pretty good. We're pulling out, before with just the soup variable, we're pulling out everything on the page. Now we're pulling out just the HTML that contains the information that we want. And so now we just have to pull out just the actual title itself, and then also the year that's in this span tag. So let's do that next. Okay, so first I'm going to get rid of this print statement. And there's two pieces of data that we want to extract from our movies list. So remember, our movies list contains each piece of HTML for every movie on the list. And within that HTML, we just want to get the title, not the HTML, just the text of the title and the year as well. So we'll create two blank lists, and then we'll loop through the movies list and pull out that data and add them to our two lists. So we'll create a list for titles. So titles equals open and close square brackets. That just creates an empty list called titles. And then the next one will be for the years. So we'll create another empty list called years. And so the next thing we need to do is create our loop. So we'll use a for loop. So we'll type in for movie in movies colon. So for each movie in our movies list, let's extract the text of the title and put that in our titles list, and do the same for years. So the first thing we'll do is type in titles dot append, and what this does is it tells it to append whatever we put inside these brackets to our titles list. So what do we want to append? Well, it's going to be some data from the movie. So for each item in our movies list, but what specifically? So let's look back to the HTML. So remember, for each item in our movies list, it spits out this whole table data element, and within it we have an anchor tag, and within our anchor tag we have this text. So that's our title there. So what we can tell it is to pull for that specific movie, grab just the anchor tag, so .a, and then we don't want to grab that whole HTML of the anchor tag, we just want the text inside it, so we'll do a.text. So for each movie in our movies list, grab the text of the anchor tag within that movie. So then we'll do something similar for years. We'll type in years dot append, and this is going to look a little bit different because let's go back to the HTML here. So the year is actually outside of this anchor text. It's still in our table data element, but you can see after the title of the movie, this anchor tag gets closed, and then there's a span tag or span element, and within that we have our year. So we'll have to grab it not from the anchor tag, but the span tag. So we can go movie dot span dot text. And again, if we just did movie dot span, it would give us like that whole like span class equals secondary info, and then our year, and then the closing span tag, but we just want the inner text, so that's why we add the dot text. Okay, so now let's just test if this works. So let's print out our titles, and then I'm going to open the terminal back. And so if this all works, it should just spit out a list of all the titles. So Python 3 scrape dot py, enter, and there we go. We can see all the movies are now in our list, comma separated. And so we could do the same for the years just to make sure that those are working, but they should be. So we run that file again. And the more data that you're pulling, the longer this can possibly take. And there we go. We have all of the years as well. So now we have all of our data. So pretty easy stuff, right? The next thing to do is just write that to a CSV file so that we can open it as a spreadsheet. So we'll get rid of this print statement, and then to open or create our CSV file, we'll use the with keyword, and then open, and then inside single quotes we will type in the name for our CSV file. So we can just call it movies.csv, and because we're going to be writing to this file, we'll type in a comma and then W in single quotes, and then we just have to assign this a temporary variable called file. And so within this, we will create a new writer variable and set that equal to, we'll use the CSV module and its writing capability to write to our file. So we're creating this writer variable, and we're using the CSV writer function to write to our temporary file variable. And so now we just have to loop through each of the movies and write a new row for each movie with our title for that movie and the years that we're pulling from the titles and years list we created in this for loop. So we'll create a different type of for loop. We're going to type for x in range. Now, I'll explain this more in a second. So 0, and then len for length of our titles. And so what this is doing is we're giving it a range of 0 to the length of our titles. And so basically that gives us the length of our titles so that we can create a new row for each title and year. So we have to tell it how many times to loop and then write a new line. So that's where this range comes in. The range accepts two values, the first being we typed in 0, so that's where the range is starting from. And our range is going to end at the length of our titles. So that should run, because we have 250 titles, that should run 250 times, starting with 0. And this x variable will increment each time. So the first time it runs, it'll be equal to 0. The next time it runs, it'll be equal to 1. And so each time we write a new row, we can pull in the first title, so the first title would be title X, and X would be equal to 0. And so lists always start with 0. And to grab the years, that should be titles with an S. And so the years would be years X. And so again, the first time this runs, X would be equal to 0. So it'll pull, putting in X will pull the first title and the first year from each list. The next time it runs, this will get incremented to 1. So X would be equal to 1, and so it'll pull the second title. And so it'll run this each time for the length of our titles. And so each time we'll write in the title and the year, and that should give us each line of our CSV file. Now you could also do the length of years. It'll be the exact same thing as titles, right? Okay, so for each item in this range, we are going to use our writer variable to write a new row. So we type in write row, and then we have to tell it what to write. So it's going to be 2 cells of data, one for the title and one for the year. So for the first piece of data, we're going to type in titles and X, and then a comma, and so the next column will be years and then X. So again, each time this runs, so the first time X is going to be equal to 0, and so it'll pull titles 0 and years 0, which will be the first item in each of those lists. The next time it runs, X gets incremented to 1, so it will pull the second item. Because lists always start with 0, so you would think 1 would be the first item in the list, but actually 0 is the first item, and then 1's the second item. And it'll run this until we get to the end of our list. So let's run this now and see if it works. So we'll go down back into the terminal, type in Python 3 scrape.py, and it'll take a few seconds for this to run. And so this time it doesn't print anything into the terminal. That's fine. When it's done running, it just closes out the program. And so what it should have done is looped through our movies and created our list of titles and years. And then in this function here, it writes them all to a CSV file. Now, you don't see it here. In the terminal, if I type in the ls command for list, it does show a movies.csv file, but we're not showing it here. What we have to do is refresh our project. So in the terminal, we type in refresh and enter, and it'll refresh everything, and now we can see our movies.csv file. So if I click that, we see now we have our CSV file, which is just a comma separated file of data. And so each line would represent a row in a spreadsheet. So we have the title, and then comma, and then the year. Title, year, title, year. So all we have to do is save this this file now to your computer as a CSV file, and you will be able to open that in Excel or Google Sheets or any spreadsheet software, and you now have all of the data in a spreadsheet, and it only took a few lines of code. Alright, so that concludes this tutorial. As you can see, as you get more familiar with working with these modules and scraping the web in general, you can create a pretty powerful script in a matter of minutes that can scrape large volumes of data in mere seconds. So it's really powerful stuff. Obviously, depending on the web page that you're scraping, this is all going to look a little bit different, and it's definitely going to be helpful if you have a general knowledge of HTML. If you want to learn more about web scraping and some of the other stuff we've been doing in Python, there's a really good resource. It's called automatetheboringstuff.com, and it's a book on doing all sorts of this stuff using Python. You can purchase the book, but it's also available for free on their website. And if you notice, there's actually a section on web scraping. So if you want to, go ahead and do some more stuff with web scraping, there's a lot of information on there. And there's also tons of other free tutorials online if you just search Python web scraping tutorials. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something. And most importantly, I hope that you have a great day. Thanks.